In today's episode of the podcast, I had the pleasure to speak to Andrew Lichtenberger, or as most of us know him, LuckyChewy. And no, it's not the type of shoe you drink out of. He's clearly had a tremendous poker career with over 13 million in live tournament earnings, but more importantly, he's sort of an anomaly in poker in the sense that he's someone that oozes zen, presence, and general happiness. In my opinion, those are not very common traits around poker players. So I'm very excited to have him on the podcast and to share the opportunity to learn more about these traits. As always, please leave a like on the video. It really goes a long way. And if you find it valuable, why not share it with your friends as it helps the channel grow. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So, Chewy, what's going on, man?
I'm just enjoying my time in Vegas, post World Series, just sort of getting back to a bit of a routine. I badly needed to take some time off. It was super hectic, and yeah, I mean, a lot of great tournaments, and told myself I was going to go really hard, and I did. And yeah, got to find that balance again. So it's nice. Going to take a fun trip with my wife next week, and just enjoying spending time with friends around town more than I was able to whilst everything was going on.
Yeah, totally. So where are you heading next?
We're actually going to go to Greece. We're going to go to the island of Crete for 2 weeks on Monday. Should be a lot of fun.
I actually just came back from there. I came back, not Greece, but yeah. So my wife she has roots in Greece. Her dad is Greek, and they have a little holiday house in Longo, which is 2 hours north of Athens on the mainland, but by the coast. It's beautiful, and yeah, you're gonna have a great time.
Awesome. Yeah, I see your tan. I was going to say something, but now I see
it's not from Sweden. I mean, it's pretty sunny here too. I'm in Stockholm right now, visiting my mom, but no, it's definitely from there.
Right on. That's awesome, man. Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, cool. Well, what do people call you other than Chewy? Like, what do people outside of poker call you? Because I always call you Chewy, and I hear other people call you, either LuckyChewy or one dealer this year. I remember when we're at the same table, he couldn't remember your nickname, and he kept referring. He thought it was Lazy Lizard. Do you remember
that? This was in the Six Packs?
Yeah.
I don't recall that specifically. Yeah, that's hilarious.
So he was just sitting there, and then a friend of you walked up to you and said, like, "Hey, Chewy, blah blah." And he goes, "Oh shit, that was your name." I was thinking it was the Lazy Lizard. I couldn't for the life of me remember what it was.
Okay, yes,
the Lazy Lizard. I like that.
Yeah, no, it's not bad. I like to ideally not be too lazy. Yeah, most friends in poker call me Chewy, and then ones that are even like poker adjacent would still probably call me that. Family, mostly just Andrew, but yeah, not too much else. Never really been an Andy kind of guy or anything.
Okay, yeah, that would be weird to me.
Yeah.
So let's jump into your poker journey.
Sure.
Super curious to hear about it because I really don't know that much about your background. I know we used to play versus each other, back in the day. This is dating 12 years ago, Black Friday and all that. What was the moment you knew that you wanted to become a professional poker player?
Yeah, I remember it quite vividly, actually. It was senior year of high school. So I'd been playing for maybe like the better part of a year, but not super seriously, just donking around online. I mean, I guess I was taking it serious, but my actual level of skill was fairly low. I don't think I'd found any like resources. 2+2 was sort of my main inspiration to get better at poker. And it was just some Friday night hanging out with friends at some like small party type gathering. I kind of just realized like, just talking to the people that I was close with, like, senior year of high school, people are deciding where they're going to go to college, what they're going to pursue, majors they're interested in. And I just kind of realized like none of this is for me. I really just want to pursue poker, but I didn't quite have enough of a head start. So I did end up going to a local school on Long Island in New York. And I was there for 3 semesters, but I didn't take it that serious. Obviously, I mean, I kind of went in knowing that I wasn't that into it, but it was a good experience. I did sort of need that as a bridge in some ways, because getting the exposure to the things that I was pretty sure I didn't want to do, maybe even more certain that I didn't want to pursue like a further academic path. And it did give me a lot of free time to, get further into poker. Like it was pretty funny. I was commuting to this college. It was like 30 minutes from where my parents were living and where I was living. And I would just go in the library and just like load up full tilt in between classes and just like play for an hour. I was just super, super into it. Like I'd be, browsing 2+2 during the classes. I was just completely all consumed. Um, it's actually one really funny moment where I played all night and I went to like some class, whatever I had the next day. I only had, one short thing. And I remember being so tired. I was like, wow, I'm never going to do this again. And I came home and I took a short nap, a couple hours. And I literally did the same thing the very next day. I stayed up all night again, playing online. Then I went to school again, completely exhausted. I was like, wow, I really have to get my self-control in order here to make it as a poker player.
Is it funny, like back then, how much more energy and stamina you had just like from fuel from pure passion of the game and the newness of it? Whereas now it'd be a real struggle, I think, to pull up those like all-nighters and back-to-back like long sessions. Even though with
Yeah.
all our experience, like back then, it was just like so much was just fueled by like pure passion and excitement for the game and trying to figure things out.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think like, I don't know, 10 years or 15 years of time passing, it definitely does have an impact on how um, able or how capable I am of harnessing stamina in big moments. But I've always sort of been the type of guy, like when it gets really intense, like, you get down to like final table bubble or final table, like the adrenaline just hits me and I'm just there. Like I think I do really well in Ironman type poker formats. But yeah, it is interesting. I've enjoyed sort of seeing that trajectory of how it changes over time. That's been enlightening in many ways.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I definitely thrive with adrenaline. I think day ones is almost the days where I struggle the most because you really don't have that much adrenaline on the day one in any sort of tournament except maybe the main event or if you're playing super high roller or something that's really intense. And then from there, it sort of almost gets easier. Like day two, there's a little bit more adrenaline building up. You're closing in on the money bubble. And then day three and day four, yeah, sure, you've been playing poker for many consecutive days, but you get closer to the end goal, and it's like a new challenge every day, and it gets a little bit more and more challenging. So you just have to step it up.
Definitely. Well said. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. In some ways, it's almost like I was talking to someone who's newer to poker, but taking it very seriously. And we were discussing like, is poker an addiction? I'm like, well, I don't think so because I can take time away, but I love it. And it's also what I do to support my lifestyle. So, it has some qualities of addictive things, I guess, but that feeling, that adrenaline or the rush of winning, that is quite an addictive feeling. Like that's something that I definitely crave at times. And yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I really do enjoy that though. It feels very fulfilling, it feels very wholesome.
For sure. And especially the first time, like going back the first time you made a final table or even just like catching a tournament, like it's a completely different feeling than it happening now, I think, at least for me. So
Oh
it
yeah.
definitely comes in stages. But yeah, the addiction question is a pretty interesting one because I've asked myself the same thing, like how addicting is actually poker and how healthy is it, as something to do full time. And I think, addiction, I wouldn't call it addiction, but it's like a different form of obsession, almost like more obsession than addiction. So you're like, I'm actively choosing to do this. But yeah, I could
Yeah.
look to someone uneducated to see, oh, he looks addicted. Like, you share a lot of the same traits as maybe someone who's struggling with addiction. But it doesn't have to be something bad. It could actually be something good if you're really obsessed and really striving to excel in something. Um, but yeah, it's a fine balance, and you really have to be somewhat cautious there. But also
Yeah.
using that for something good, rather.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree with that for sure. Yeah.
But it was interesting what you said. The academic classes really wasn't for you, and I was the same way. I went to culinary school and thought I was going to become a master chef, and then sort of dabble into poker, and that was it. But what do you think? What do you think you would do if you weren't a professional poker player? Like, if you could go back and let's say poker hadn't planned out the way it did, like let's say there was never a path there was never a poker boom, there was never that opportunity, or you just didn't have what it took. But what do you think you would do now?
Hmm. So in high school, I was really into like graphic design, and one of my best friends, kind of continued to pursue that and has, really carved a path in that industry. But I don't know that I was never really as good as him, and I didn't really have that same passion. I did enjoy like philosophy and sociology classes when I was in, that brief year and a half stint of college. So maybe something in that domain. I've sort of enjoyed music, but to play at a professional level or do it as a career, you have to really take it seriously. So I'm inclined to think some sort of philosophy type path is maybe where I would have found myself, but I do really enjoy the challenge that poker offers you. And I feel like, most academic endeavors don't quite have that same competitive elements. And I think if that was lacking, like, it's not so much, I think, I'm sure you can relate to this, probably most pros our age, pros in general. It's not so much like the beating of other people that's enjoyable. It's like the overcoming of challenges yourself and like the discipline and the pursuit of mastery that, forces you to be better. Like that to me is kind of the essence of what poker is, I guess, what it contains that allows you to, just evolve on a personal level.
So is it fair to say that that's where you get your motivation from?
Yeah, definitely. It's just like being better than I was yesterday or the week before, or the month or year before. Like looking back and seeing like, oh, that's quite cool. Like I've changed for the better. Like I do really enjoy that.
How do you track those metrics? Like, do you compare your sessions, or how do you go back and compare like how you progressed compared to, let's say, 6 months ago?
I don't know that I have any way to quantifiably track it. Maybe that's something that I could look into in the future. But I just like to often introspect and just, consider like, hey, the player I was 6 months ago, for example, like how does that map up with the way I'm approaching the game now? Like, am I learning? Am I improving? So far, answer is pretty much always yes, which is good.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
because I always found it personally. I always found it that it's very difficult to track success in poker. If you just look at the results, it doesn't give you the full picture.
right.
But it can be difficult to find the right metrics to quantify how you progressed over time as well. Because I often feel like I'm not progressing much, but then I go back and I compare. I'll watch like an old final table that I played, a year ago, and I see like, oh wow, I definitely wouldn't have played this way today.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the most valuable skills poker has taught you about life, and like skills that are translatable to life that you think are valuable?
I mean, I think just the general problem solving and thinking on the fly, and the fact that, in poker, every situation is unique. like suppose it's nice to tie it into the modern era of poker, solvers and whatnot. Like all these models are inherently flawed because they're dealing with like static inputs, right? But in poker and in life, you know, the inputs are not static. So it's nice to have like something to go off of. Like that's quite helpful. But then being able to tweak it in a way that's more representative of the situation you're in is really what I think uh, the most successful players and the most successful people in life are able to do. Um, so yeah, I think for me that's always been really enjoyable, is knowing like there's something about this situation that's a little bit off. It's a little bit different, and yeah, I think that is quite relatable. Like people you meet, or even people that you've known for a long time, or people close to you, like you can sort of apply a lot of those situations. I haven't really found that success in business just yet, but I do think there is a lot of transferable skills that poker teaches you that can be used successfully in other areas of life. And it seems that a lot of poker players have, transitioned out and shown that to be true, or other people who have done well in other industries and have transitioned into poker.
Yeah, it's always been interesting to me how we can use what we learn throughout our poker careers in other areas. What other opportunities are there out there to either do good or have success in other areas? Do you think it's possible to feel fulfilled as a poker player, given that we're playing a zero-sum game for a living? So your success is determined by somebody else losing. How do you turn that into something positive and something that actually feels rewarding?
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of an inescapable fact of poker that, like, we're playing heads up. Like, I win if you lose. It's a very, very binary outcome. And I do think that, like, I really thought about this a lot some years ago, and I've tweaked my perspective since then. But I do think in some ways the fact that we're playing for money is sometimes overwhelmingly considered in this, and it should be, right? Like it's a part of it. But I think anytime that I lose, it forces me to learn and become better. Anytime I beat someone else, they also get that same gift, right? They can evolve as a player and a person. That being said, I personally don't feel totally fulfilled if that's my only interest. And at times, like say WSOP, where my life is out of balance intentionally for a period of time, like when it all wraps up, like, okay, I need to get back to like family, friends, giving back, win or lose, just like, having that feeling of, just giving without any sort of attachment to poker or winning, or because it is a different part of your brain that activates, right? Like when you're playing and you're trying to beat somebody and you're trying to, perform at a high level, it's not nearly the same thing as when, like we're having like a nice conversation now. It's just totally different. So I do think it is possible, but for me, I need to have other things going on to balance it all out, because it can easily get out of balance.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there's no friends at the poker table if you're playing, if you're playing from a place where you don't want to see your friend or other players lose, then it's definitely going to hurt your EV, right? So you always have to.
Yeah.
How important do you think motivation is, or goals rather than like the drive for why you're playing, in order to stay competitive and actually playing, optimally and trying to win, fight for every pot, so to speak?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never been like a super goal-oriented person. At times I've set like short or midterm goals. But as you mentioned, like in poker, 6 months to a year, whatever, like your results just might not match up with your skill. So I do think like result oriented goals can maybe skew the motivation in the wrong way. But if you just like say, hey, I'm gonna review streams of people I'm playing against for however many hours a day, or study for however many hours a day, or be in chat or voice groups with people and review spots. Like that type of stuff I think is very useful. And I've sort of just structured my life in a way that that's just a part of my everyday, like some form of poker. Like I'm kind of just always doing something. And that is just because I genuinely enjoy it, and I'd rather be doing nothing else. So yeah, I think in a roundabout way I answered the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not looking for a specific answer. I just want to have a discussion, because it's something that's really that I ponder on a lot. But to me, it seems like there's almost three categories of players. So in terms of motivation, so some are strictly motivated by monetary goals. They want to make money. That's why they play poker. Others are motivated because they're competitive and they just want to compete. They don't really care that much about the money. That's not the focus for them. It's just about competing. That's their main motivator. And then we have others who I think are just playing because that's what they do, and they don't really consider like their actual goals. They just like to play and like the social aspect of it, perhaps. Or maybe they were once motivated by one of the other factors, either money or competitiveness, and now they're just like keep doing what they've been doing for many years because that's what they know, and they don't see another path to do something else, or they've maybe grown accustomed and comfortable in that environment.
Yeah, I do think like in times where I've had bad stretches of downswings, often I sort of lose touch with the reason that I got into poker, which was simply because it is fun, which I guess would be like the third group. But it seems like the aforementioned third group is also probably the group that takes poker less seriously and is not often, inhabited by many professionals. So I think I probably oscillate between the three. But when I start to get too money focused, I know it's not really in my best interest. But it's also a part of poker that is showing you desires you have, or just perspectives that you want to overcome because they're not actually like assisting you in either emotional well-being or just performing well as a professional.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find that too?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's your reasoning behind why you play and your motivation to show up each day and perform is hugely important to and correlated to your success, or at least your chances of success. Obviously, it can affect the eventual outcome. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of being a professional poker player, that you can do everything right and you can have all the motivation in the world and put in tons of money into playing and have tons of hours into studying and still come out, on the losing end for months and like even years. Like there's no certainty in your financial or success. It's just one of those few industries where there's really no control over the eventual outcome. And that, to me, at least, has been one of the biggest challenges throughout my career.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I think that balance really helps with, like spending time away from poker. It's easier to brush off bad stretches or tough runs or whatever. Because when you really let it consume you, and then every time you're out there playing, like it's looming in your mind, like you almost develop like a form of PTSD, where it's like every time like you're in a pot or like you're in an all in, like you already have this dread of like, I'm just going to lose, because that's like what's been happening. And I think that's really just like, it's awful. It doesn't feel good. It just can't be good to just feel shitty when you're playing, right? Like, it's just not, it's not the goal. Like it doesn't certainly align with, what I mentioned about getting into it because you enjoy it. Because at that point, it's not really as fun anymore, or arguably not fun at all.
Exactly. And not just that, when you have that mindset at the table, it's like you're already lost before you even lost.
Yeah.
where you think you're gonna lose all the time, and like how can you possibly make the best decisions out of that coming out of that place? It just seems very difficult. But yeah, I think balance is definitely key. Having life outside of poker, but it's tricky because you want to be dedicated and you want to be disciplined and put in lots of volume and really be like have a healthy obsession about poker to really excel and compete at the highest level. But at the same time, you need balance. You need friends and family time, and you need hobbies, and you need all this other stuff. So it's a fine balance. But I think when you have a lot of other stuff going on outside of poker, then the downswing don't bother you as much as as if you were 100% all in on poker and didn't have much else going on outside.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. I sort of have reminded myself recently that, poker is great, but it means nothing without all the other stuff. Like your relationships and the people in your life, that's really everything. And nothing else matters nearly as much as that. And it is easy to get consumed by poker and feel like it's everything. And I was playing in Paris, the 5K at the end of the series when there was like the shooter scare and everyone ran out of the room. And it was you were there too?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very insightful to me how quickly things became real. It was just in a matter of like, a second and a half, 2 seconds. Like, okay, none of this matters. And that was a good reminder for me. I was like, oh yeah, like none of this really does matter. I was fortunate, nothing, I didn't get trampled or anything. And I was grateful that it was, I guess a minimally bad outcome compared to what it seems like the fear of the collective group, could possibly mean. But yeah, what was your experience like with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was horrible. For 10 or what felt like 10 or 15 minutes, I thought I was going to die because I didn't know what was
Wow.
going on. I was in the middle of the room. So when everyone started running, instinctively you start running as well, but you don't really know what you're running against, or running from. But we had read the reports about active shooters on the strip very close by. So when you see people running towards you with fear in their eyes that they're being shot at, your immediate thought is that, oh, they're shooting at them. They're here. So yeah, it was terrible. But I definitely agree with what you said. That it really put things in perspective because ships were flying, tables were flying. No one gave a fuck about the poker tournaments anymore. And
I
there's some
know.
big
Yeah.
events going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really put things in perspective. And then coming back from there, and you're like, you really didn't care about the tournaments anymore. Like it was so hard to regain focus and be like, oh yeah, that was just, nothing happened really. That was false alarm. Everything is good. Let's continue the tournament. But everyone was, and myself included, was so like even the next day when I woke up was still shook out by the event.
Yeah, totally. It does touch on an interesting thing, right? Where it's like, on the one hand, we both sort of saw, and I think everyone probably in the room saw how unimportant poker is big picture. It's like, well, survival matters a lot more than that. But as we've discussed, you do really have to, if you're playing at a high level and you're pursuing mastery, you really have to let it consume you to a certain degree. And I guess as you said, just finding that line, it is a very fine line, knowing how much time to dedicate to different things. And I guess for me, part of growing up and just becoming more of an adult, not so much correlated with age, but more so with experience, that's been, I guess, a big part of maturing.
For sure. I mean, it's been a long journey in the whole poker career. We've been doing this for a long time now.
Yeah.
We're obviously very different people than when we once started. We were kids basically and just pursuing a hobby. You have one of the most intense table presence out of anyone I've ever played with. So I'm really curious to hear, how do you get there? Like, what do you do to prepare for a tournament? Like, how do you get in the like you seem to be very in tune and very obviously very comfortable in the setting, but also have a very good control over your emotions and being very present.
Well, thank you, first of all. I guess part of it is probably just like the 10,000 hours or whatever, just having put in so much time. Part of it is also just like really wanting to be there, right? Like it's easy to really focus and give your all when it's like, okay, I've dedicated this time for this event. Like there's nowhere else I'd rather be right now. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit surprised to hear. Like I don't think of myself as a particularly intense person, I guess, but maybe in some ways that's helpful.
Maybe intense was the wrong word. I was just very impressed with your table presence.
Yeah, I suppose I do maybe in a sense pride myself on like having a lot of focus, just really taking it all in. Yeah,
because I think you're being modest here. I play with a lot of players that have exact or even more experience than you have, both playing online and live. But yeah, I think you're in a different level, a different category. So what I mean, I can't imagine that meditation doesn't have anything to do with this. So what is sort of like your meditation routine? How do you prepare mentally before a tournament, before you play? Or like what's your everyday like routine look like?
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Every day I'll meditate at least 10 minutes when I wake up, and that to me is just like a nice way to set the tone for the day. I've certainly been in periods of my life where maybe I had a lot going on, or whatever. I just get up and just like go straight to like answering messages or email, and I can tell pretty noticeably there's a big difference in the way that you're able to like monitor or just keep your emotions in check throughout the day. It's just way more sporadic and chaotic. So that definitely does, I imagine, play a big role. And I suppose in a more sort of philosophical sense, as far as meditation and life go hand in hand, like I do think having a meditative presence throughout your days is very beneficial. And I mean, at the poker table, we are sitting, right, for many hours on end. So there's a clear carryover from meditation. Now, obviously, one, you have eyes open, and one, typically you don't. Although walking meditations or other types, like certainly you can. But yeah, I do think that must play a role. And for a period of time, although maybe less so recently, I was deep into kind of like seeing poker as a purely meditative activity. But just as with all perspectives, you can kind of tweak them over time. And I would say it doesn't make one more or less true. It's just a different way to perceive a similar thing and gain more understanding of how it can relate to you or how it can be experienced.
Wow. So you, let me see if I got this right. So you were using poker as a sort of meditation, and you were able to meditate as you were playing poker.
Yeah, well, I would say yes, but the way I would sort of describe the meditative process within it would be, just letting experiences come and go. And, a big part of, I guess, Buddhist philosophy is like non-attachment, right? That's pretty useful in poker.
Yeah.
The beats, the, losing pots, or even winning pots. Like, I think like, even personally, I've experienced this. I've certainly seen it in others. Like winner's tilt can be just as bad as loser's tilt, right? Like when you're running really hot, you feel invincible, and you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna like play this hand. It's like way too loose, or like run some crazy bluff, or just do something that is like somewhat objectively like out of line. Like you're not doing it because of any sort of reason other than you're just like you're high on your own success. So yeah, just kind of letting all that stuff go and just always coming back to like the basics, first principles, treating every kind of hand as if it is, the most important hand that you're going to play. maybe that contributes in some ways to my presence. Like I really do try to treat every hand as if, this is the one, like this is most important. Like,
even
making,
the first hand of the day.
yeah, ideally, I'm not going to say that I'm always able to really do that in the way that I would like to, but more often than not, I guess, and that's a win for me.
Yeah, I mean, it must be because because of the detachment, as you were talking about. Because most people, and myself included, I see poker as sort of the opposite of meditation. Meditation is what I do to calm down and to keep my nerves down. But when I'm playing, I might look like I'm, unbothered by things. So when you're winning and losing, there's, constantly going, your adrenaline levels are constantly going up and down. And that's really tiring, especially if you're mixing that in with intense focus from day one. So what I've heard a lot of people are doing, they're trying to not use a lot of energy in the early levels or even the early days of a long tournament to maintain that focus. But it seems like you're able to maintain focus from the very first hand of the tournament throughout the entire tournament, whereas other people would have burned out because they're using so much energy in all these adrenaline dumps and the ups and downs.
Well, at times, I think yes, but sort of what I did experience personally this summer was that playing so many days on end at a certain point, like we do have physical limitations, and maybe I can overcome that, or some people have over time. But I noticed a definite drain on my abilities as time went on, and it's sort of a more ephemeral kind of drain, because like if I'm honest with myself, like the way I sat at the table, the way I was playing hands, like it was the same, but there's something like backing it. It's like, just how much energy do you have when you show up? That was definitely less. And I will often like late register because I want to give myself time to relax, get some sun, get a workout in, do whatever I need to do, so that when I do get to the table, I feel like I'm going to really give it my all. But yeah, for me, it's still really an ongoing process. Like it's challenging. When you late register, you give up the early levels where you're playing against maybe some guys that in reentry formats won't reenter. So getting those chips is quite useful. And then also, like, I do think there's something to be said for in bigger field tournaments, when you get there early on time and you're playing from the first hand off the deck, you're sort of like you're very attuned to what's going on at the table. And when, say, someone else comes in late, like they don't really know how the 5 seat's playing, or this crazy pop between the 1 seat and the 8 seat. Like they're not privy to that information. They're almost like they're coming into your domain. And I've experienced that on the opposite end, right? Like I come in, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm coming in cold. Like I don't really know what's going on. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to ponder, because ideally you'd like to maximize your earn and also not burn the candle at both ends. It feels like there's a way to sort of meet the demands of both worlds, get the best of both worlds, but it's challenging. Yeah, I'm sure you have experienced similar challenges.
Oh, I've experienced the exact same thing that you're talking about. The balancing act of not sacrificing too much EV, of showing up late and missing that information that could be key later on in the day, where you're if you're showing up level 3, for example, in the main event, and some guy have lost half their stack and you have no idea how, and the other guy, some other player, has double or clearly shipped up, and then you're getting in the hand with one of those opponents and you have no idea how he played. But if you would have watched the showdown of that previous hand, you could have gotten a lot of information that would have swayed your decision making in this current hand, which is gonna either win or lose you a big portion of your stack. So it's definitely key. But at the same time, you want to focus on your preparation and make sure you're ready. And by sacrificing that EV, you're saving a lot of energy, and you're going to be a little bit sharper towards the end of the day instead. So Yeah, it's definitely something, and also FOMO is something I'm battling with a lot. Knowing that I'm people are playing already and ships are flying and I'm not there, and then when I do show up and I feel like I've been missing out, how do you tackle that feeling? Is that something that you keep in mind or bothering you?
Wouldn't say it bothers me, but I'm aware of it. I suppose I would like the way I generally perceive it is like, okay, they're playing, but like in it, I think of how to really describe this. Like um I can sort of sense it because I know exactly what you're describing. Um it's like they're playing, but like I'm not there yet, but they're doing their thing, and I'm going to eventually enter, and uh, they will, they'll already have they'll already have this situation ongoing, and I'll just be able to slide right in. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I I don't tend to feel. I guess when I'm at my best, I should say, I don't really feel as if like I'm missing out on anything, but I have definitely had that feeling. And I guess I don't really like being driven by those more carnal desires, maybe the right way to say it. It's a very primal kind of feeling of like, these people are doing this thing. Like I want to do this thing. Um, that feels somewhat superficial to me, but it also is a real emotion that props up at times. So I don't know. I don't have a great.
Yeah,
I guess yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, go
it can
ahead.
make you feel like a little bit unprofessional. Like, oh, decided to sleep in, and then I went to the pool, and then I did a workout. Where really I should be there playing, because you see, like, all the other professionals are there because it seems like everyone's showing up on time, and they're getting all that EV from showing up early, and here I am treating it as a vacation almost. So that's
Yeah,
something I'm battling with as well.
yeah, it can definitely play with your mind and your emotions a bit in that sense. I have felt that. I suppose
Or
like really knowing why you're doing what you're doing is a decent way to mitigate the hold that that has over you, or at least I found that to be somewhat helpful.
for sure, and then also not be result oriented, and when you show up level 5 and you only get 50 big blinds instead of 100, and then you get it in on a big flip or whatnot that you otherwise would avoid it if you would have been there on time. So that could be
Yeah.
something as well.
Sometimes though those results, like if they're repetitive, like it does show you like, hey, maybe there is more value in showing up earlier. Um, but I mean, I guess big picture, like if you track results, like it shouldn't matter that much. Although I do recall someone showing me some spreadsheet of a bunch of stars regs and tracking like registering on time versus late registering, and the win rates were very comparable, but the actual like first place finishes were much lower in the late registrants. And like I've late registered in one tournaments, and I've also registered on time in one tournaments. And I do think one thing that at least I would sort of derive from that is that when you show up on time, sometimes you're really ready to be there. You're ready to go. Like you're there to win. And sometimes like when I late register, it's like, okay, well, this tournament's running, and uh, I'm just going to play because it's just like the best thing to do. It's like a totally different way that you approach the game when you sit down, right? Like in one, you're like, yo, this is my thing. Like I'm here to win. And the other, you're like, oh, this is just the best option today.
Yeah, yeah, it goes back to like taking a little bit of a, not a vacation, but like taking a little, focusing on other things. When you're there on time, you're really there on time. You're really motivated, and you're waking up early and you're doing all these things, but you're there on time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it could also, a natural conclusion of that stat would be that when you're late registering, the average stack would obviously be higher than your starting stack. So you're already coming in with a chip disadvantage.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
going to be
definitely.
tougher for you. It's almost like you're playing a satellite, and it's more like getting into the money as a middling stack. Whereas when you're there on time, if you're still in the tournament, you more likely would have chipped up than down
Yeah. That's a
potentially.
fair point.
Um, you also seem to be happy all the time. Is that true? Does nothing ever
I would
bother
say,
you?
I mean, certainly things bother me. I'm definitely not like a robotically happy person in that sense. Like I'm not, I am very optimistic. Like I think for me, that's really important. I'm a pretty sensitive person, I would say. And for example, like I really don't like scary movies. And I'm just like, why would I watch something that is like trying to elicit these like emotions of fear? Like it's like viscerally unpleasant. So in that same sense, like I just um, attach positive meaning to as many situations as I can where it seems useful. Um, so yeah, I suppose I'm like an eternal optimist. It's just a more pleasant way to live for me. But it also kind of just is who I am. Like it is authentic. It's not like a contrived thing where I'm like actually really angry and I'm just presenting as positive. Like I do think um, that's something maybe people try. I'm not saying like I've seen this or whatever, but that doesn't seem like it would work as well, I suppose.
Do you practice gratitude, or what do you think one can do? Because it's something I'm trying to be a more positive and happy person. I think everyone would like to be, but I think it's interesting to discuss like what we can actually do to get there. And whenever I see or meet someone who seems to be enjoying life and have a positive outlook and perhaps more positive than I do, I'm always curious to hear their thoughts and patterns, what they do to get there.
Yeah, I do think gratitude is huge. Like just feeling that heart opening feeling of uh like you're just very thankful that like you have this life and you have the things in your life. Like, going back to the idea of just like the people in your life meaning everything, I think there's a strong corollary between that. Often, like those people that we love the most in our lives help us just sort of innately get into that state of gratitude. But I will say, in poker, like my biggest successes have come when I've had like the most love for not only myself, but the other people at the table. And I know like some people go into it like, oh, this is war. Like I'm really like, I'm going to like destroy my opponents. And I think that can work too, right? It's just like where you drawing your energy from. I do think like love, in again, a more philosophical sense, is the most powerful force in the universe. It's like, I mean, it's where life comes from, right? And like even the sun seems to me to be quite a loving thing. Like, getting some sun on your body, like this feels good. Like it feels like a very loving thing. Um, but yeah, there was another part of the question that I sort of forgot as I
No, I just like
go into
what
this.
do you like where do you get your positive outlook on life, and how do you
Yes. I really think like reframing things. So like say, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, like the shooter scare, right? That's a good example. It's objectively like no one would like choose that off of a multiple choice list of things to experience on that day. But I was listening to someone speak recently, and they were saying how sometimes there is actually like a phrase for this. It's like a theory of some sort, but sometimes the more unpleasant things in the short term give you more benefit in the long term. It's like weight training, right? Like you're stressing your body in the short term, but then you're having these benefits of um, releasing whether dopamine or
endorphins and
exactly.
dopamine.
Yeah. And I think, not that the shooter scare kind of gives you that, but it does bring you back to like, hey, what really matters is like human life. And this game is not all important. So yeah, I mean, you can still like pretty easily argue that we didn't maybe like we still don't want that type of stuff to happen. But I guess in a way, like I'm very accepting of life, and even the things that I would prefer, like if I'm being honest with myself, I would prefer they don't happen. I sort of always take it as like, okay, this thing happened, therefore it needed to happen, even if just to alert me of the fact, or me or other people or the collective, of certain specific things, so that it doesn't need to happen again. Like I'm very open to experience, I guess. And I'm always trying to frame things in such a way that it's like, okay, this happened because, X, Y, or Z positive outcome.
Interesting. Do you have the same outlook on losing in poker or missing a flight or even more traumatic
Totally.
experience, like someone close to you passing away?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Wow.
do. I think it really, it helps just deal with the ups and downs of life, where it's like, okay, this thing happened. I would like it not to have, but it did. And I have to just accept that. And I may as well just give it the most positive sort of connotation that I can, because, it's almost like the old cliche, like no sense crying over spilt milk, right? It's like, it's done. You're not going to put the milk back in the bottle, at least in very efficient fashion. So
Yeah,
it is what it is.
it is what it is. Yeah, that's a good expression as well. But
Yeah.
often, easier said than done, especially when
Yeah.
we are human with emotions, and it is hard to keep the emotions intact. But that's obviously something that we get sort of fostered into and practicing on a regular basis in poker.
Yes. And I would say that, like, not feeling the emotions that maybe you intellectually don't want to experience is detrimental, because you're putting yourself now in like a inauthentic state, where you're feeling like, okay, I don't want to, I don't want to feel angry, or I don't want to feel grief, or I don't want to feel remorse. It's like those are still part of who we are. And sure, we can work towards minimizing the impact that those emotions have over us, because experiencing them is unpleasant. But when you're experiencing them, you may as well just go all into the feeling and be like, okay, I really feel this way. I think sometimes like trying to push it away actually makes it worse. And like really letting it come in, almost in a way, like allows it to dissipate. It's like, hey, it's like knocking on your door, like, hey, like I'm here, let me in. It's like, okay, fine. Like I'll experience you just for this moment. And yeah, I guess that's just sort of a funny way that I've approached these things.
So embracing the feelings, even though they're negative, rather than trying to push them away and resist.
Yeah, and I think experiencing them allows you to transform them. Like I think transformation, or I guess maybe transmutation, is a really interesting concept in terms of emotions. And it's definitely one that I've focused a lot on in poker. Because like often, perhaps you can relate to this as well, you're playing, things are going really well, and then you start to feel like, whoa, like I feel like a glitch in the matrix, like what's going on? And I don't know if that is some sort of like biological mechanism where some part of you thinks like, okay, there's got to be a regression to the mean. Like things were going so well, now they're not going to, or if it's experientially based, or if it's something else. And just trying to, stay focused on the task at hand, like, one hand, one decision at a time, one moment at a time, not getting too caught up in like thinking about winning the tournament or whatever. Like that stuff is never helpful in the process of, obviously that's the end goal, but focusing too much on it is obviously never helpful. And certainly, it's easy for your mind to get carried away with those kinds of things.
Definitely. You mentioned,
yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that winner's tilt earlier, and it was something that I did a podcast with Chris Moorman a few months ago, and he mentioned that as well. So it's obviously a pretty common phenomenon and aspect of and challenge to not get, because it's very easy. Even when you double up the first hand of a tournament, you're like, wow, I might win this thing now. You feel invincible.
It starts to become more real.
Yeah, but like realistically, there's thousands of players left in the tournament, so nothing's really changed that much. You just have two starting stacks, but it's very challenging for the brain, for our human brains, to not get excited. And obviously, we're very excited to be there, and that's what drives us. But to not get caught up in the excitement and start playing poorly because of the emotions attached to it.
Totally.
You also wrote a book called Yoga of Poker. I actually haven't read the book, but I've read parts of it. And one quote that I particularly liked was, "Living and playing poker with an unconditionally loving attitude and outlook is a life-changing experience to uplift and expand consciousness of yourself and those around you."
Yeah, I mean, I think that relates to what I mentioned about my biggest poker successes coming when I am in that state. And yeah, I just find that to be more powerful than, as I mentioned, like the more sort of warlike approach of like, I'm destroying, like I'm ripping these people's faces off kind of thing. And I think it also, I guess it makes winning and losing easier. Because winning, as we are discussing with Winner's Tilt, like winning is also a challenge. And I think it does also make it easier for the people around you to experience their wins and losses. Like I find it really distasteful when people, act out when they lose, like, throw the chair or whatever, or like push the chips. Like yeah, I mean, that stuff, it's just, it's an emotional immaturity, right? Like if we're just being honest, that's what it is. And it's it's entitlement. And it doesn't mean that like, I don't feel those things sometimes, but I just know that like, they're not gonna help me as much. And they're not gonna, it's kind of awkward. It doesn't make other people feel that great. And it's your right. Like, I mean, you signed up for the tournament and there's no rules against that. And by all means, like I'm a big fan of self-expression. But yeah, I would recommend everyone try
it. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of what we used to do, starting out, at least me. I used to be very expressive because I got a lot of that I got from other players because I saw how they acted out when they were losing or winning, and I started doing the exact same things. I think it really, like you say, it really sets a bad precedent for how you should behave as a professional poker player. We can't really speak for amateurs, like they're amateurs, but as a professional, I think we have some sort of responsibility to be sort of a role model for how we should behave, and also to the general public and how we should portray poker to them.
Agreed. And I think the irony is that actually I think pros are far and away more likely to have these outbursts because amateurs don't really have like an entitlement to win. They don't as much expect to win, right? They're often there just having a good time. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a nice way to play poker, is just to enjoy the experience. One thing I just remembered is I remember hearing a while ago about people who won the lottery, and like they tracked certain individuals over time, and they also tracked people who had like traumatic life experiences, like become paralyzed or something of the sort. And over time, like they regressed to sort of where they were previous to this like massively life-changing event. And I think for me, that was a wake-up call to realize that like things that happen to you don't matter as much as what you do with them. And like everything, all of like the soft skills that contribute to your day-to-day life or your routine or your relationships, that all matters a lot more. And one other anecdote that sort of drove this point home for me is, you might know more about this, or some listeners, but someone, I think he was a cycling coach. He had this idea that like, if you just improve 1% on the daily, then like you can have like incredible results. So he took some guy who was like an average or above average cyclist, and he just like got him a better pillow, like had him wake up like at the optimal time, like sleep at the right temperature, train more efficiently, all these things. And the guy eventually won the Tour de France. Like maybe he was just destined to win anyway. But I think that type of stuff, that feels like the antidote in some ways to the outbursts in some sense.
Yeah, and in poker nowadays, the edges are so thin, especially at the highest level, that if you can find an edge and if you can improve by 1%, that's huge. So why
Yeah.
wouldn't you do it? And that's sort of the reason for why I've always taken my preparation very seriously, because that's the one thing that I can actually control. And of course, studying and doing all that stuff as well. But especially my preparation and my table focus and my table presence.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. It's funny you mentioned like edges being small, and like obviously that is true. Like objectively, that is just true. But I find that to be a very unhelpful thing to have in your mind when you sit down, because if you're just thinking like, okay, I'm just here to grind out this like 20% ROI or whatever, it doesn't feel like you're really there, like ready to win, right? It's like 20% ROI equates to like a min cash or a little bit more. So I think, and I know that it doesn't influence the way that you approach the game as much as just, you know, stating this obvious fact of, you know, well, if there's all these great players, like where's the edge coming from? But yeah, like I think there's like a delusional self-confidence that can assist in a way, as long as it's appropriately handled and like only I guess like it serves a purpose in a sense.
Mm. Yeah,
I
I
don't know
mean,
if you like that or not.
no, I mean, it's good to be realistic, but at the same time, yeah, it's not super motivating to remind yourself that if you're playing in a super high roller where everyone has a 2% ROI. But yeah, it's all
Yeah,
relative. And of course, you're going to have versus some pros, you're going to have a negative ROI, and versus others, you're going to have an equal ROI, and then others, you'll have a massive ROI. But yeah, as a whole, yeah, you know, you have to be realistic. But it's also difficult to determine exactly what your ROI is. It's always been a sort of
yeah,
a mysterious factor, and something that a lot of players are arguing about, especially when they're selling action to tournaments and just trying to come up with a reasonable and fair markup.
yeah.
Another quote I saw, and this is not by you, it's a review of your book. A man who claims he used to overcomplicate things and caused himself unnecessary pain by rushing through life. So I sense that this is something that you've changed. This is how you used to live life, but now you live life with a very different outlook and a different perspective. And I'm curious to hear how you probably touched on this already with a lot of your other answers, but like how you got there and that your transformation throughout your poker career. Because like I mentioned, when we first sat down and played, but 12 years ago, you were a very different person than you are now. I was a very different person to who I am now, but
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your transformation, because it's been quite a radical one, I would say.
Yeah, I suppose it has, at least relatively speaking. Um, I guess, you know, kind of just being honest about things in yourself, like mindsets or routines that work or don't work. Or again, I always like to come back to this idea of like, it's not that things are right or wrong. It's just that they're different, and like different experiences or whatnot, like can just be more beneficial as you go on. And I would say like a journey of transformation in many ways is never really over. Like we're always sort of changing. Like change is the constant of life. So I would say I even still experience change in that regard, have like reflections or insights as far as like, oh, like maybe I am just like rushing through experiences instead of like taking them in and appreciating them for what they are. Um, yeah, I suppose it is just like a different way to perceive life. And I've certainly found it to be quite nice. And maybe it's not like a super mainstream way of thinking. And I've certainly lived in a more mainstream way, at least growing up. Like it was a very sort of normal existence. And it was once I started to really pursue poker on a professional level that I sort of realized like, oh, this like really offered me a lot. And obviously to this day still continues to do so. Like what are the things that aren't societally upheld as like, you know, quote unquote, the answer or the truth are of interest. And I guess that's sort of what probably led me down into more alternative philosophies or perspectives. but you're always gonna get the good with the bad, right? Or the things that work with the things that don't work, I suppose. Not to do exactly what I just said I don't like to do. To label things good and bad or right and wrong. But yeah, it's been nice. Just I one thing I would say I do as a person is like really open myself to experience. Like I love meeting new people. I love just like having like one-off, like, hey, I meet someone, like let's just go on a hike. Like let's just do something fun. Like I'm always down for new experience. Like that's something that I don't think I'll ever really change. And sometimes you meet some really great people, you have awesome times. And sometimes you meet people and you just don't vibe with them as much. Like that's okay too. Like I would rather take the risk, commit like, a day or a few hours or whatever to a new experience and bet on it with my energy of being like a positive outcome, positive experience.
I love that. And the reason I asked is because I see a lot of what you said that you used to be in myself, like rushing through life, causing myself a lot of unnecessary pain. Not always, but more often than not, living in the future, planning for what's next, not really being in the now, in the presence, appreciating what I have, where I am now, who I'm with right now, and just causing myself a lot of pain simply and anxiety over what's next and what's in the future. So I was curious to hear like what's your journey look like there.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I fall back into that, right? Like I do think both in poker and in life, that's kind of a cool thing. Like you never like beat it. You always have to come back to the things that got you there, or the things that sustain you in that experience. But it's quite an insidious thing because it can be very perpetual, right? Like thinking about the future, like, okay, well, the future is always going to be there. So if you're always thinking about it, you're not living like with presence. Like it's always there, and you always feel like it's like the carrot, right? Like dangling. It's like you're almost there, but you never get there.
Yeah, it never ends.
It's quite funny how that works.
Yeah, never ends until we die, and then none of this matters. No, but it's true that why are we living for it? We're always thinking about the future, and we're not living in now and what's happening now. It's a never-ending journey, and something you always have to question yourself at and work through.
Mm-hmm.
What world problem would you like to solve and why?
I mean, poverty would be pretty nice to eradicate. I find it challenging. It's one of the reasons that, like, I guess I do give a lot outside of probably too much at times, just being honest, like probably not financially responsible, but it really weighs on me. Like just knowing that there's so many people who live in conditions that are relatively inhumane or just straight up inhumane. It's not easy for me to stomach that. And I know that a lot of that is like oppressive governments or, even just bad decisions on the part of the individual. But it feels like poverty is, if like you imagine humanity as like one person, which obviously it's not, but like imagine like a body. Poverty to me feels like, okay, like, the entire like left leg has like gangrene. It's like, well, if we don't like, deal with that, then like it's going to get amputated. And like, well, then we just have like this one-legged person, which, maybe we might prefer that left leg to be intact. So I don't know exactly how it pans out long-term, but I would like to do as much as I can on a individual level to contribute to the, other parts of the body that want to heal it in a way.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue, but
yeah, it is.
It would be awesome if, one day we can, when we're done playing poker, that we can use our poker brains and create something that can actually make a big difference in the world, not just donate money, but it's obviously hard to do whilst you're playing. Yeah, not a easy easy thing to solve. but you got to start somewhere. And I think, yeah, I like your analogy with the one body and treating the leg, because otherwise we're going to lose the leg, and doing it
Yeah,
before
like
it's
it's
too
just
late.
exactly. It's interesting you mentioned like when we're done playing poker, like I guess I don't I don't think of like I'm going to stop at any point. I do have a lot of things I want to do adjacent to poker. And, there'll be periods of time, I'm sure, where I take it more or less serious. But one thing I've always sort of, maybe not always, but for a while, I've sort of considered, and it's become slightly more real, although I'm not like actually in the process of doing this, but I really want to open a school one day. I think it'd just be so cool. Like so many things, talking about like alternative perspectives on life. So many things that I learned through poker, not just the strategic component of the game, but the life experiences it gave me at a young age. And I guess, the soft skills to poker that I never learned really anything about this type of way of thinking in school. And I had a reasonable education. Like it was a public school, but reasonable school district, like I would say average or above average for what a kid in America would be subject to in their youth. I just think that'd be really, really fun. Like just kind of mix it up a little bit and, still have the core things that you need as a kid to like learn. But also to, and I guess this does speak maybe more broadly to the education system in the US, which in some ways I would say contributes to poverty. Not teaching like life skills, right? Like financial literacy, a lot of stuff about health, and it's a lot more academically focused, and that's fine and that's good. But there's just so much more to life. So yeah, I think it'd be really fun and something I definitely want to do at some point.
Totally. I would definitely join you on that project. I think it
Cool.
would be super rewarding and fun.
Yeah, I
Challenging, of
think
course,
a
especially
lot
to
of challenge.
get the parents to sign up. Just get to see the headlines. Hey, a few gamblers started a private school. You want to
Yeah.
send your kids and give it a shot.
The easiest way would be to have kids and just send them there.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I think that's the best way, honestly. But you start a collective and then word of mouth marketing, and if you, I mean, a lot of our peers are starting to have kids now, so
yeah,
it'd be, not that
totally.
hard to get the first few signups. But yeah, I think teaching in general, I know you do a lot of coaching as well. So how rewarding that could be. And I can only imagine how
Definitely.
rewarding it would be to actually teach, more, even more important subjects than poker, especially to younger population like children that has all the whole future ahead of them. And I also feel like
Yeah.
the curriculum of most schools are so outdated, and it's like never gets really
Yes.
reviewed and up to date where we are now. Like how is it the same curriculum today as it was when we were in school? Like look at the world, like look how much I've changed. It's crazy,
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's for
a lot of
sure a
room for
problem.
improvement. But yeah, it
Yeah.
is obviously a very sensitive subject too, because you're dealing with children, and it has to be very slow progress, unfortunately, unless you do something private.
Yeah. That is the challenge. Working within the confines of the public education system. I mean, I haven't looked into it that deeply because I'm not really at the stage where I'm ready to sort of enact this project, but it doesn't really seem realistic. I mean, because they're so unwilling to change things over time, doing something private probably is a more pragmatic choice. I know actually one poker player who lives on the East Coast in the US. Him and his wife and like other people they know, they just decided like, hey, let's just get our kids together and just hire a few teachers, and they just do their own thing. They're not like a school board or whatever.
Like homeschooling.
And basically, yeah, but it's like group homeschooling.
Ah,
It sounds really cool. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And the teachers get paid better than they do from the whatever local school district they have. It's just like, oh, this is just a win across the board. I guess the downside is that, again, the the less fortunate families, they don't really have the disposable income to be able to do something like this. But maybe this type of thing catches on, and then ideally, government realizes like perhaps that, yeah. Or I mean, maybe this is a pipe dream, but government realizes like, oh, this is more efficient. Like, let's do it this way. But even the words coming out of my mouth, I'm like, yo, like this is not, it's not how government tends to function.
No, I mean, not during our lifetime, probably, unfortunately.
Well, my optimism would say that like we have to hope that it'll change, right? And I suppose some action is also necessary, but it's tough for me to accept that like it just won't change.
Yeah, I also struggle with that acceptance of how things have been, and when there's such a clear path that things could be so much better. But speaking of which, I remember this was a couple of years ago. I haven't asked you about this personally, but I heard a rumor that you were thinking about actually starting a community of some sort, buying a plot of land, maybe in Texas, Austin, and basically joining all your friends. Everyone builds a house or gets a plot and build a whole community there where things are done a little bit differently than perhaps in other cities, or what you may call them, where it's more of a community base. But I'll let you explain if there's any truth to that rumor.
Yeah, so I did have a property in Austin, and I was building on it. The way in which it was approached was slightly different. Like it was going to be consisting of various tiny homes. So you could have a bunch of people sort of all living there together. But the idea was to make it more of like a short stay hotel kind of thing, and have people be able to come and stay, and in some ways get like a reprieve or a retreat from like the rat race in a sense. But it didn't really pan out, and I ended up selling it. And maybe at some point down the line I'll do something, because I did learn a lot from kind of the project generally, not only the experience of like sort of doing some building, but also just like the ideas I had that related to it. So if at some point I were to do something somewhat similar, I'd have a lot more insight as to how to go about it.
Amazing. Sign me up.
Cool. Yeah.
I think
sounds
good.
Good.
I thought it was more of a long-term thing where you actually move for good, and then you build a community and you share a lot of the responsibilities and a lot of the assets in the villages. But I heard
that would be cool too.
Yeah, a friend of mine was talking about something similar, but in Vancouver, they were trying to start something like a community building, where you can share. Perhaps they would build a school for sure, hire teachers, do exactly what your friends were doing on the East Coast, but also just like nurseries and healthcare and farming, all that stuff.
Yeah,
it could be super cool.
Yeah, it's like a breakaway civilization. It's like, we don't like the way you're doing things. Like, we're going to do our own thing.
Yeah. Speaking of, are you going to Burning Man this year?
I'm not. I've only been once. I went in 2017. I had a lot of fun, but it was it's a big undertaking. Like, it's also not like, so it's super fun because of like who you're with and the activities, but it's not my favorite environment. Like, it's complete like desert, right? There's just like no, like I really like, which is ironic in some sense because I live in Vegas, but there is some like green around the area I'm in, like trees and bushes and grass and whatnot. But being without that for so long, it was a weird experience, but I really did enjoy it. And it's certainly like a really fun like bucket list thing. Like if people are on the fence, I would say go experience it. Like, saying I like new experiences. So this was a good one to add. Are you going, or have you gone?
Yeah, I'm glad you ended on that note when you said you've only been once, because you're actually the first person I've ever heard went once and then didn't die to go back. or wasn't dying to go back, actually. Yeah, I'm actually going the first time this year.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Who
excited
are you
about
going
it.
with?
I'm going with your former camp, I imagine. So I got invited by
Okay.
my buddy JC.
Nice, dude. Yeah, you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, I
It'll
bet.
be a lot of fun. Something beautiful about it for me was just how rich the creative expression is. Like people spend so many hours building these art installations, and when you're out there at night, just like biking around and just seeing all these, like it's like you're on another planet. Like you really feel that way because it's so foreign from the everyday life experience. Um, yeah, it's all you're gonna have a blast.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard to even picture what it would be like when you haven't been. So I'm super
Yeah,
excited to go and check it out myself, and hopefully I will want to go back. But we'll see. I'm doing once and not having super high, like not having, I shouldn't say high, but not having too many expectations and just kind of
yeah,
going with the flow and see what it's about.
yeah. It's a good way to do it.
All right, Andrew, it's been real. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Yeah,
And
my pleasure.
I
Thanks
hope
for having
I'm
me.
sad to not see you in Burning Man, but I hope to see you soon, maybe somewhere on the tour or otherwise back in Vegas.
Definitely. Sounds good, man.
All right, thanks a lot again, and take care.
Yeah, take care.